Well, good afternoon, everybody. I understand that some of you may have been on my friend Tim Kaine's earlier report, and I think this will be obviously the last report we make from Washington before Thanksgiving, and I'll add this at the end, but anybody drops off before the end, I hope everybody has a happy and safe Thanksgiving. My favorite holiday, it and Halloween are my two favorite. I got a few topics to go through at the top end, then be happy to take your questions. The first is my ongoing focus on China. Today, we introduced legislation, bipartisan legislation, that deals with Chinese threats to our financial system. This is legislation that Abigail Spanberger championed in the House. It's already passed the House. My hope is to see if we can get it passed quickly in the Senate as well. One of the many areas that China is a concern is its financial threats to America, current potential for currency manipulation, potential for example, shell companies that oftentimes may buy into technology-related companies. We've got to make sure that Treasury is following this in a regular and specific way. And this bipartisan legislation, again, already passed in the House, would take a big step forward. The second is that on China is that tomorrow I'll be in Charlottesville, where I'm very proud of the fact that University of Virginia has won a major award from the Director of National Intelligence to set up a open source center out of UVA, but working with universities, think tanks, and others around the country to look at how we compete on a technology basis with China. You've heard me talk about this forever in terms of that was the generation of the concerns about Huawei on the telecom side. It was the generation of the chip spill on semiconductors. We had a classified briefing 2 days ago about the Chinese bio threat in terms of even China investing in techniques that could make super soldiers right out of a science fiction movie in terms of genetic manipulation and implants into a human body. We've looked at China's threat in terms of advanced nuclear and a host of other technology domains. And UVA will be able to draw upon its resources and resources of other universities and good thinkers around the country. This is a very significant step forward in terms of this competition with China. And finally, a topic that I've raised with you all that I think in the coming days will actually start receiving the attention as more of the facts come out, and that is called Salt Typhoon. Salt Typhoon is the largest hack of our telecom system in American history. This is a hack that makes OPM hack of years back, the Colonial Pipeline hack of years back, the SolarWinds hack of years back look small in comparison. Unfortunately, the Chinese have been into our telecom networks for over a year, literally able to listen to voice conversations, see where you've called, who you've called, even some of your texts, if you are not communicating Apple-to-Apple device, for example. And we've identified victims so far that have been notified, and the challenge is they are still in the system. This is concentrated initially in the greater Washington area, but we've now found evidence of breaking into switching and router systems in other parts of the country. Extraordinarily serious. We need to get this information out in a broader way to the American public. And we need, I'm in active conversations with both my Republican friends and some of the companies involved. We have to put in minimum cyber security standards. We don't have, in many cases, we've tried to get speed so fast in our telecom networks that sometimes the price of that is added security. And I think as the full extent of this hack becomes known, we have to come up with a solution. There's no 100% solution, but frankly, we should have been ahead of this already. This happened in Australia about 2.5 years ago. It was the biggest news in that country for days and weeks on end. I think as this gets out, there'll be an awful lot of questions that deserve to be asked. And part of the problem is, and as a former telecom guy, I don't want to go into all the details now unless you ask, but it just is, our network is cobbling together of a series of telephone companies and wireless companies. They've come in through the wireless networks. And there are switches, routers, and equipment that is so old in some of these systems, they literally can't be patched. So you're going to hear much more about Salt Typhoon in the coming days. So that's the China issue. On a more hopeful note, back in 2022, the Biden administration put together a 24/7 maternal hotline. Starting a family is one of the great things that I hope more people are able to experience. But being pregnant, especially the first time, for a lot of families causes a lot of stress. And if you're a single mom, where do you go to get answers? So there is a 24/7 hotline that can answer questions in English or Spanish. And I think there are also others who've got language expertise. We're trying to get this information out more. The number is 1-833-TLC-MAMA. And we want to try to get that information out so that expectant moms can know that there is a trusted, confidential helpline that you can call. No question is too basic. And I hope, while this has been out there for a while, and I help get the funding for it, we're really trying to promote it now so that more Americans, more Virginians can take advantage of it. Finally, an issue that is critically important for the whole country, but particularly important for Southwest Virginia and Western North Carolina, and that's disaster relief. The administration came forward with a $198.6 billion request, almost $100 billion, to deal with the results of Hurricane Helene, Hurricane Milton, some of the other storms that have not been fully dealt with, the bridge collapse in Baltimore. We need to get this done. Disaster relief funds, whether they are FEMA or small business loans, that's what you pay taxes for. And we need to get this done as quickly as possible. I've been particularly concerned about the small business loans. My friend Tom Tillis and I, the Republican senator from North Carolina, we've gone to the floor and said, even if we have to debate, the $100 billion and how we get that dealt with, let's go ahead and at least fill up the bucket on SBA loans. And here we're only talking about $800+ million because we have folks in Southwest Virginia who have applied for these SBA loans, been approved, but they're still not getting their loan because Congress hasn't done a job of refilling the bucket. And it is cruel that we had 99 senators that were willing to go ahead and let's just do this on a unanimous basis. One guy held it up. And if we don't get the SBA funding done earlier, chances are the overall FEMA funding will get tied up in the kind of end of the year battle, and that'll mean there might be Virginia businesses that have been approved that don't get their money until Christmas or New Year's. That's just not fair. It's just not right. It's crazy in my mind. It's why people get so frustrated with the government. I think overall, talking to the governor, and I just was on the line again with all the county administrators, generally speaking, there have been some glitches, but FEMA's been down. We've had some glitches on ag funding and ag response. That's picked up. But it's just wrong that we have not, on a unanimous basis, gone ahead and refilled the Small Business Association funding so that people who have been approved for loans can get those loans in a timely fashion. It will get refunded. It will get funded, but it sure as heck shouldn't take another 6 weeks to get that done. So Tim and I and the whole delegation are on this issue of overall FEMA disaster relief, but particularly the small business funding. It's got to be top of mind. So with that, why don't I turn it over to Laura and be happy to take your questions.
Senator, our first question is Hannah Brandt with Nexstar.
Hi, Senator Warner. Thanks for taking the time to do this. Wanted to ask you about pollster Nate Silver calling on President Biden to resign. And specifically, he's pointing to the fact that, it's an increasingly dangerous global situation that we're dealing with. Obviously, you're chair of the Intelligence Committee, so you know the dangers and threats more than most. I mean, do you have faith in President Biden's leadership for these next 2 months?
Listen, we have an election system and a peaceful transition of power. I'm working with the president-elect's team, and we've got to vet those individuals that have been put forward. And there is a reason why there is a Senate process of advise and consent. I've got some serious questions, particularly about some of the national security nominees. I think, I wish President Biden had moved quicker on giving some of this additional assistance to Ukraine, particularly the ATACMS, which would allow some of our more advanced weapons to strike into Russia, only into Russia at the sites where Russia is launching air attacks and drone attacks. I think that could have been done earlier. But I absolutely have faith that this administration will finish. There'll be a transition to the next administration. And again, I think he's shown that he respects that tradition. He opened the White House to President-elect Trump, a courtesy that was not extended to him when President Trump was last in office. And we will get through this transition of power. And we do live in a dangerous world. And my hope is, and again, we saw last night where there were already 37 Republicans that are trying to cut off assistance to Ukraine. I still believe, and as chairman of the Intelligence Committee, believe that to give Vladimir Putin a big win in Ukraine raises the threat of him looking beyond Ukraine and those nations that are adjacent to Ukraine. Many of them are members of NATO. So if you want to see American troops or NATO troops engaged in a potential conflict with Russia, let Vladimir Putin have a pure win on Ukraine. And I'm terribly afraid that we could face that reality.
Senator, our next question is Rachel Branding with WSUT.
Hi, Senator. Thank you so much for doing this. I know you just touched on this briefly, but as President Biden did recently pivot to allow Ukraine to use the U.S. assistance in Russia, why do you think this is a decision made now? And is it something that you think the administration should have done without Senate approval?
Well, listen, the vast majority of us who have been strong supporters of Ukraine urged the president to allow the use of these weapons literally months ago. Senator Rubio and I believe wrote a private letter to him as early as August. There was concern because you don't want further escalation. You've already seen Putin indicate that he's changing his nuclear policy to at least rattle that saber, which is obviously a concern. I would have liked him to do it earlier, but the justification, the reason he did it now, I think makes sense when you've got a third nation in the terms of North Korea sending troops into combat, and we're still following whether they've actually engaged in combat in that portion of Russia called Kursk, where the Ukrainians have captured Russian territory. But the idea that that Russia is bringing a third nation into this conflict with active battle troops, I think it was appropriate for the president to do this. And again, let's be clear: we are seeing the Ukrainians slowly lose ground in the east. But for those who say that this is a slam dunk, that Russia's going to be successful, Russia's had over 500,000 casualties. Russia has a rate of desertion from their army that's unprecedented. Russia is losing, in terms of killed, wounded, or missing, about 30,000 troops a month. The expectation is that Russia only has about 3 more months of those kind of losses before there's going to have to be a mass mobilization, an extended draft in Russia. I'm not sure the Russian people want that. So far, they've been willing to fill their ranks with paying soldiers big bonuses. But again, go back to the fact that the Ukrainians have performed remarkably against a larger enemy without the loss of a single American or NATO soldier's life. And it would be morally and geopolitically wrong for an American administration to pull the rug out for them.
Senator, our next question is Tyler Englander with WRIC.
Hey, Senator, thanks for doing this. I know that Dr. Oz will come before you on the Finance Committee. Senator Fetterman said he would vote for it if he doesn't make any cuts to Medicare or Medicaid. What are you looking to hear from Dr. Oz, and is that your same approach, no cuts to Medicare and Medicaid?
Well, it's quite a proposal to have Robert Kennedy, who is a medicine skeptic and a vaccine skeptic, versus a doctor who sells, I think, supplements on TV. Again, all of these nominees deserve a fair hearing, but they got to have a hearing. You got to have the American public see them testify. They've got to answer questions. And across the board cuts to Medicare and Medicaid, especially from a president who said he's not going to touch Medicare at all. The circumstances, it's going to be very interesting to see. The president-elect made a lot of promises, and I know a whole lot of Americans thought, well, I like this part of him, but he's not going to do all these things that seem way out there. Well, time will tell, because I think he's going to try to do the things he said. And and we'll see which promise the president-elect and his appointees are going to keep. The one to protect Medicare and Social Security, or the idea that he's going to slash trillions of dollars from government spending, and the only place you slash that kind of money is a place like Medicare.
I'm going to remind everyone on the line to please mute your mics when you are not asking a question. Moving on is Bill Atkinson with the Petersburg Progress Index.
Senator, thank you for having us today. It's always good to speak with you. My question is, dovetailing on what Tyler was asking a moment ago, do you think the Petersburg and Richmond pharma industries could be severely affected by the incoming administration and the possibility of RFK Jr. leading HHS, given his history of battles against the industry and some of his denials? And what can you and Senator King do to help prevent any sort of adverse effects that may come from a Kennedy-led HHS?
Great question. I think the innovation that's going on in Petersburg and Richmond is some of the most exciting things that are happening all across the Commonwealth. And I'm proud of the fact that some of the innovation programs that I helped get passed and funded have provided literally millions and millions of dollars to jumpstart this. I think the conversion of the Boehringer-Ingelheim plant into the ability to, for example, produce insulin at a low cost is some of the most exciting innovation I've seen anywhere in the country. And this chance to have a medical tech bio hub in Richmond and Petersburg is one of the most significant long-term economic developments for the whole state. And, it's been bipartisan. The governor's been a big supporter of this as well. And we're going to protect it. I've read a lot about Mr. Kennedy's views. They seem to zig and zag. I mean, some of the ideas about trying to get us to a healthier diet, I'm all in on. But the notional idea that we're going to get rid of, childhood vaccines, I mean, and dramatically change, the data is overwhelming. I mean, at some point, look back 20 years at the level of, or 30 years at the number of child deaths from all of these diseases. So I am concerned about some of his views. I got more due diligence to do, but I'm going to fight like hell to make sure that the innovation that's taking place in Petersburg and Richmond around bio, around advanced pharma, particularly some of the ideas of part of the innovation there is even around a nonprofit manufacturing component for pharma. That's extraordinarily exciting, and it would be short-sighted and just plain dumb to see if that funding was cut off.
Senator, our next question is Elizabeth Byer with the Cardinal News. Elizabeth? Okay, we're going to move on to Layla Mitchell with WDBJ.
Hi, Senator Warner. Thanks for doing this. I was just wondering if you could just comment on why it's so crucial to maintain focus on long-term recovery needs of areas impacted by Hurricane Helene, even as the national attention shifts to other issues.
Well, great question. Prime example of this is the Creeper Trail. The Creeper Trail is a great asset to all of Virginia. It's a great asset to our country. It goes from Abington to Damascus to White Top. Damascus is a town that had hit hard times. It is one of the most vibrant communities in Southwest Virginia. Its whole economy, $225 million worth of economic activity coming out of the Creeper Trail. Creeper Trail, half of it was destroyed. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars to get it repaired. We go a couple seasons without the Creeper Trail reopened, and that's why I'm trying to work with the locality to see if we can get a temporary part of the trail open so you can get up to the mountain and still ride down maybe on roads, and the part of the trail that's still open, hook back in. You're going to have those businesses not be able to get through if they don't get the small business loans that they deserve. And it is just plain cruel not to do that. I think about the agricultural loss we've got in Grayson County. In excess of over half the loss, overall agricultural loss, and it was, in tens and tens of millions of dollars just in Grayson County. If those farmers can't get relief, what do? They sell down their cattle herd because they can't get back enough feedstock because part of their fields have been damaged. Those farms go away; they're not coming back. Claytor Lake, we're finally making some progress there. Great recreational, great for Pulaski County. There was, you've maybe seen the images of the amount of debris. It's one of the only rivers that actually flow south to north. And so much of that damage even came from North Carolina, came up to the lake. People who live on that lake and the economic activity, we don't get it cleaned up. The values of those homes are going to plummet. So, Virginia stood up when Florida was hit with hurricanes. We stood up when New York and New Jersey were hit. We stood up when there were wildfires out in the West. And it galls me when you got members who say, well, I'm going to take care of mine, but when your community's hit, oh, no, we got to change the rules. We got to find some pay for. Again, I don't think using the term cruel is inappropriate. It's totally bipartisan. Tom Tillis and I and Tim Kaine and Morgan, and we're going to fight like hell to make sure that those businesses, those families, those communities get the assistance they need and they can build back stronger. People in Southwest Virginia are tough. I know in those early days as I visited, I said, I know people are proud and don't want to take outside assistance, but this is not charity. This is your right as Americans. We stand up for each other. And we got to get this job done.
Senator, our next question is Avery Davis with 29 News.
Hello, Senator. Thank you for speaking with us today. There appears to be breaking news right now that Matt Gaetz has withdrawn, and I'm eager to hear your reaction. I know in the tweet it looks like he mentioned a conversation with senators leading up to this, and so I'm intrigued to see your reaction to this news that he is no longer in the running.
Well, that's breaking news because I didn't hear it. But if he did, I think it's frankly better for the president-elect. I think that nomination was going to be very, very, very difficult and frankly not from the Democrats as much, but as from Republicans. I was not sure Mr. Gates could have actually been confirmed by the House Republicans who worked with him. So we will see what happens next. I mean, these are serious jobs, and we have a history. Doesn't matter whether you're Democrat or Republican, to put serious people in these jobs. When you're running the whole Justice Department or the whole Defense Department, or if you're the Director of National Intelligence, these are jobs that take serious people who've got a background and experience and have got a temperament that know how to manage and get things done. And so if that information is true, I think it was the right choice.
Senator, our next question is Ashley Knight with Wavy News.
Good morning, Senator. I was wondering, with Virginia being the home of so many federal workers and the incoming Trump administration talking about drastically reducing the number of federal workers, what is your reaction to that, and how big of an impact will that have on Virginia?
Well, I think no state would be harder hit by these kind of across-the-board cuts than Virginia. We've got a lot of federal workers. We've got a lot of commercial and private sector contractors. I think about all of not only the folks that serve currently in the military in Hampton Roads, but all of the private sector contractors. And you just, this is where some of these promises, when they hit reality, the idea that you're going to protect defense and cut $2 trillion and not touch Medicare or Social Security is not mathematically possible. It just doesn't work. So, this is where promises and reality hit. And I think, again, I'm very proud of the fact the Virginia delegation, last delegation that meets on a bipartisan basis. We had our lunch this week where we talk about issue. We talked a lot, and I got a lot of my friends in Hampton Roads and Richmond and Northern Virginia got to help us on Southwest. Folks in the Southwest region got to help protect our military and the private sector contractors in Hampton Roads and Northern Virginia. But we bear the brunt. I mean, we bear the brunt when we do these crazy continuing resolutions. Because as you know, what you do with a continuing resolution, and we're already 3 months into the fiscal year, you take last year's spend and just continue on that number in those projects. Well, if you're in ship repair and you finish the ship, you want to get it out of that dry dock and get a new ship in. But if you're still using last year's budget, you can't do that. And the amount of money, taxpayer money, we waste every time we do one of these continuing resolutions, to anybody that claims to be a conservative, your head ought to explode. I mean that figuratively, not literally. But yes, we're going to stand up for a federal workforce. If there are ways to be more efficient, count me in. I do think our federal workers need to be back in the office. I do think we need to, use technology tools to make AI in particular, to make government more efficient. I'm open for all of that. But the idea of coming in and picking some arbitrary number and saying we're just going to cut, and by the way, we're going to still protect defense and protect Medicare and protect Social Security. Some of the people making those promises have not looked at the numbers. I'm still a numbers guy. I think I've now crossed over maybe more in politics than in business, but I belong to the smallest minority in the U.S. Senate that I can read a balance sheet. I'm not sure some of the people who are making these promises or projections actually can.
Senator, our next question is John Fredericks with the John Fredericks Show. We're going to move on to Amy Knowles with the Virginia Dogwood for the final question.
Well, I just want to make sure, John.
Senator Warner.
John, if you wanted to ask a question, I would be happy to have you. But Amy, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm all right.
Good. Well, Thanksgiving is next week, so it's time for my favorite annual question. I bet you know what it is. So what are you most thankful for this year?
I'm thankful for my family. I'm thankful for my friends. I don't have a big family. I've only got one sister and got 3 daughters. So we spend Thanksgiving with family, but also, I think we're going to have 23 this year. A bunch of friends who are in many ways part of my extended family right now. I'm thankful for the fact I've had, I throw a lunch the day before Thanksgiving, and it's my 38th year in a row. We call it the Pilgrim's Lunch, and it started with a group of guys playing basketball and having lunch afterwards. It's now grown to almost a couple hundred people, and we are all blessed and lucky enough that day that we sometimes make our spouses mad because we sit and eat and have a good time that day, but we raise money so that others, for food banks and for programs like so others might eat. I'm thankful that I've got the wherewithal and have got a group of friends who care enough about others to, the day before Thanksgiving, spend some good time together, but also are willing to recognize there's an awful lot of Virginians and Americans that still need help, and proud to do that. And I'm thankful, like particularly in this year, for our country and our system. We came through an election, didn't turn out the way I was hoping, but we didn't see, especially at the very end and the aftermath, because it was a clear-cut win for President-elect Trump, the kind of outside interference that I expected and I think would have come if we'd been much closer. And I'm thankful for the fact that I believe that our Constitution and our institutions will be able to stand up, that nobody's above the law in this country. And while we're going to go through some bumpy times as we go through the holidays and into the next year, I wish the President-elect well. I wish those members of his team well, because at the end of the day, as he said, even on election night, we got to bring this country together. And I hope during that period of Thanksgiving, we all not only thankful for our friends and family, but we all say a little prayer for our country going forward. And with that, happy Thanksgiving, everybody.